guys. I've honestly lost track of all the different times when people ask me how to learn English vocab. Maybe you've been in one of these situations. You're learning something and then you can't remember it like at all. Or maybe you're learning something, but then you're not sure how to use this in context. How do you actually use that phrase? When and what situation? What is the correct way to say it? There are a lot of different challenges, and I decided to put together a checklist of things that I do with my students. So right now in this video, I'd like to go over those things and explain them a little bit, give you different examples to kind of give you an idea of what it could look like if you were to study English vocab in an efficient way that is evidence-based. So I'm going to put the checklist right here, so you're going to see it as we go. So there are two versions of the checklist, one very short one and the longer one that has all the different explanations. So the first point on the long checklist is when you're working on something, it can be a video, an audio, a text of some sort, you pull out the phrases that you think could be useful. So for example, you see something like to go about your business and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Or to avoid doing something. So with these examples that I've given you, I want to kind of tell you what kind of things you should really pay attention to. The first step in the longer version, with all the explanations, is when you're working on a video or some sort of a text or an audio, if you hear some really useful phrase, something you think, oh, that's interesting, I gotta check what this means, or maybe you're like, oh, this is great. I mean, I know it, but I've never used it. So that's a good idea to write that down. Or maybe you're using a book and you're studying with a teacher and there is a bunch of these different phrases. We usually call them lexical chunks or chunks. So for example, it could be something like to go about your business. And things you should consider are something like this. Like, do you actually use this phrase to talk about business? Well, no, to go about your business can just mean to go and do your stuff, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be business related. Then it's to go about your business. Can you say, let's say, and to go about your business? Can you say to go to your business? I mean, it's kind of odd and it's not going to have the same meaning. It's going to mean like a physical location. You wouldn't say that though. You'd say like to go to your office or, I don't know, you would just phrase it in a different way. But my point is, you really need to focus on those prepositions and articles. Is there an a? Is there about, at, of? And you want to also focus on the grammar. Is it going to be, okay, in this example, you don't have that. So let me give you another one. Let's say to avoid doing something. Is it okay to say to avoid to do? Well, no. And over time, it's expected that you're going to learn the grammar that explains to you why it is like that, so you can apply it in more situations. That's absolutely expected. But in the meantime, you can start using it just if you pay attention to the right things. So when you see the word avoid, you want to learn that you avoid doing something. It's always going to be followed by a verb with ing, like to avoid talking, to avoid buying something new, to avoid thinking about a topic. And in this checklist, I bring up a lot more examples that you can take a look at, and I kind of dive deeply into what you need to pay attention to. Let me just give you, I guess, one more example. Let me pick one. Let's say to make a killing. So let's say this company really made a let's say food delivery apps really made a killing during the pandemic. Made a killing. Why? Is it just one killing? What is that? To make a killing is like to make a lot of money, usually more than expected or usually easily or fast. Can you say to make the killing? I mean, yeah, if you're talking about a murder, about killing somebody, I mean, it's still a bit odd to say that, but you could. So those little things, those prepositions and articles can really change the meaning. So when you're learning chunks, you have to pay attention to that. So now let's imagine that you've already done all of this stuff. You've pulled out different chunks. Now what? So the next step would be to research all of these chunks and ask all those questions. Is it the? Can it be used in a different way? So there's a lot you can do, and I give you some ideas. So you can use any dictionary. You can use several dictionaries if needed to look up things like the transcription. This is how we say words, but it's written in special symbols, because how we just, the usual spelling, those are letters. And the transcription is basically the writing of how we pronounce something. So you can look that up. You can look up what something means. And you always want to look up examples, because that's how you really get the feel for how to use something properly. You can absolutely use ChatGPT. Now, look, I'm not saying that this is like the perfect method. And in my experience, it can spit out a lot of really bad answers. But that doesn't mean that it's not still a great tool. It absolutely is. It can be sometimes unnatural, like if you ask it for examples. It can make mistakes, especially related to pronunciation. Like the other day, I asked it to generate a bunch of words with a flap T, like the way we say, let's say, water instead of water. Yeah, but it was terrible at this. So it's not perfect for everything, but it's still an excellent tool. A dictionary is also not perfect. A lot of the examples in dictionaries are very formal, and that's not how we really speak. And that's fine. You just need to understand that it's imperfect and still use it to benefit from it. So yeah, the more example sentences you look at, the better. And I give you a couple of examples of how you can do that, what you can ask ChatGPT when you're working on your chunks. Another website you can check is Youglish. This is a website where you can like type in a phrase and you basically it's going to pull up all the different videos where somebody says that phrase. So it can really help you improve your pronunciation, your listening. You can always slow down the video. You can pick one of the accents that they offer. It's not perfect. Sometimes you click American and it still can show you some Brit pronouncing something. But you know, again, it's not perfect, but it's still an excellent tool. Then you really want to give yourself an opportunity to create your own examples, because that's when you actually try to use that stuff. That's actually when you struggle with that vocab in a more active way. And please keep in mind that struggle is an absolutely integral part of learning. You cannot really learn something and keep that memory of whatever you learned for a long time unless you struggle. Like, it's necessary. So here I'm showing you a way that I, in Spanish, and my students in English keep track of all the chunks and examples that they make. So usually all my students have this mirror board, and they like keep a list of all the chunks with the examples that they make, and I check them. Obviously, you need feedback. You need somebody to check them. That could be ChatGPT, again, imperfect, but still excellent. If you have a teacher, that's much better, because they can really give you more than you could ever even think of. They would be like, okay, this is wrong, and correct it, or, well, this is okay, but we don't really say that. And you're like, oh, or, you know, this is okay, but usually uneducated people say that, so maybe don't. So sometimes you can get really valuable feedback. ChatGPT can help you, just maybe it won't do everything you need. Just keep that in mind. Next up is make flashcards. Now, this is one of the key things you want to do. Once you have everything ready, all the chunks, all the examples, you can make flashcards. And let me start by saying that there is a ton of different ways you can make flashcards. In here, I just give you one example of how that can be made. I've actually been working for a couple of years now on a course on making flashcards in an evidence-based way. So I think I have a few months to go before I'm ready with it. So here I just give you one possible way to do that. Now, these are the things you want to do. So for example, take all your chunks examples and put them in ChatGPT and translate them into a language that you're comfortable with. For example, Arabic. Then take that and put the Arabic on one side of the flashcard, and this is going to be your question side of the flashcard. I'll explain why that is important. Then you have all these different flashcards with Arabic. Now your job is to translate it, but do not keep the English version in front of you. That's just going to be too easy. The idea is, again, to struggle to retrieve that information, which basically means you force your brain to give you that information. That's how long-term memory is created and strengthened. So then you're gonna have some mistakes, and that's okay. I can even show you some of my Spanish flashcards as an example. Let's say let me see if I can find any with mistakes. Let's see. Right. Now, on the other side of the flashcard, you're going to write the answer. And you might make mistakes. So once you're done, what you want to do is correct those mistakes. So now look at your correct chunk examples and make mistakes. The best part about this is that in the future, when you're actually practicing with these cards, basically you will be forced to pay extra attention to the problematic areas, the things that you are more likely to forget. So here I was using the wrong verb in the Spanish flashcard. Here I basically wrote it incorrectly. I thought it's extranjero, but it's extranjero. It's really hard for me to say that, but I'm working on it. So that's something you could do. Now, why am I saying that it's really key to, separate the question and the answer side of the flashcard? Remember, the key is not to just read the answer when you're practicing. So what I'm not going to do is this. Okay, to be one of the safest cities in Latin America. Ser una de las ciudades más seguras de Latinoamérica. No, that's not what you want to do, because what I'm doing here is I'm just reading. That's passive retrieval. That's not good for you. It's just you're gonna forget it very soon. So what you wanna do is actually say it on your own without looking at the answer. That is key. So I read the English version and then I'm like, ser o estar, maybe I don't remember which verb, and that's okay. It's still better to say it with a mistake and then look at the answer than just read it. So I'm going to try to answer this flashcard, and only then I'm going to check. Then, how do you actually practice? Because it's not sustainable to have one pile of flashcards and just every day go through all of them, because over time you're going to have hundreds of them, and that's not ideal. So one of the ways you could do this is take into account what we know about the forgetting curve. I'm not going to go into much detail about this, but long story short, there was this guy. He decided to test his memory, created a bunch of very short words like mech, ruru, and whatever. And he basically practiced those words, and he was trying to see how soon he's going to forget them. And he figured out, and I'm going to place the forgetting curve somewhere here. He figured out that, you forget most of what you study within a day or two. And of course, it depends on a lot of things, like if it's something very emotional, I don't know, your sister is pregnant, then you're more likely to remember it. But if it's a grammar rule, you're less likely to remember it. But the interesting thing that happens is that once you do active retrieval, just reading is not going to cut it. When you do active retrieval soon after, then you're going to remember better. And the best part of this is that over time, how fast you forget is it's going to take longer. We can say that the forgetting curve, the curve flattens. So basically, maybe the first time I make it, I need to practice it like today. Let's say I made it, I need to practice it tomorrow. Then maybe I can wait 2 days. Then maybe I can wait 3 days. Now, obviously it's not really possible to remember which flashcards you practiced when, but there is a very easy way to get organized. And I also sort of break it down in there, but I'll show you how I go about it myself. So basically I have all these different flashcards. I have 8 different boxes here, 4 over here and 4 over here. So the moment I make my flashcards, they're all in the first box. The first box I practice every single day. So if there's anything there, which means it's new, I'm gonna practice it. Now, when I practice, when I answer the question correctly, perfectly, without looking at the answer first, then it can be moved to the next box. But if it's in, let's say in the beginning in the first box, if I don't answer correctly, it stays in this box. Now let's imagine I'm in box number 4. Let's say I look at this flashcard and I cannot for the life of me remember. So I look at it, I did remember it, it moves back 1 box, because each box is going to be practiced at different intervals. So here I suggest that you practice box number 1 every single day, box number 2 every other day, box number 3 every 3 days, then every 5 days, 10 days, 2 weeks, about every month, and 3 months. Now, how can I keep track of this? Let's say I look at this box today, I'm like, I have no idea when I practice box number 7. So here I suggest that you just create a calendar and you basically write, okay, every other day in the calendar, you write number 1. Oh, no, sorry, number 1 is every day. So you don't need to write it. You just know if there's something in number 1, then you practice it. For number 2, every other day. So for example, April 12th, April 14th, April 16th, and so on. The third box, number 3 in the calendar, you'll just write every 3 days. So 1st, 4th, and so on. And you do that for every box. And this way you don't need to remember when you practice what. You just look at your calendar, you're like, okay, April 12th. And you're like, okay, in the calendar it says 2, 6, and 7. So you practice boxes number 1, 2, 6, and 7. And that's it. So this organization system works because it applies what we know about spaced repetition, which is when you create gaps between between practice, let's say, study sessions is what I was trying to say. And this gap increases over time because remember the forgetting curve? So it just makes sense. And I explain all of this in this checklist so you can read through it and see it again. And you can feel free to just message me and ask me. You can email me in the description to this video. I'm going to leave my contact information and of course the link to this checklist. So after that, I'm basically telling you, okay, now you're ready. You have all the flashcards, put them in the first box, and then follow your calendar to practice. Like I said, practice box number 1 every day and the rest based on your calendar. You don't really need to put more thought into this. Now, then I kind of break down the key thing to remember. So active retrieval, I've already mentioned it. I'm going to mention it again. You do want to struggle. If you don't struggle, you're not going to remember. You might remember right now, today, like today, tomorrow, or in 5 days, it's gone. So you want active retrieval. Now, how does learning, let's say a phrase work? So you learn it for the first time, you start forgetting. That's normal. You retrieve that information. It can be through making examples. It can be through some sort of an exercise. Maybe you dump all your chunks into ChatGPT and are like, hey, can you make an exercise for me? Why not? If you have a teacher, it's their job to figure out how to give you more opportunities to practice this in speaking and in writing. And so basically you retrieve again. So it's this simple. You learn, you retrieve, forget, retrieve, forget, retrieve, forget, retrieve. And this goes on. Just the time that it takes to forget is becoming, longer and longer and longer, which is a good thing. So over time, it's going to be pretty easy. Now, you absolutely need to create opportunities to actually use that in real life, in speaking and in writing. And I'm sorry, I don't have a magic solution. Just talk to yourself. I mean, as great as that is, that's just not enough. So you need to find opportunities to practice. There's no way around it. You have to. So you can find a speaking partner. You can find a teacher, obviously. You can, for writing, you can use ChatGPT and be like, hey, I want to use these chunks. Can you create different exercises so I can practice it? Maybe some writing exercises, and it's going to give you some writing prompts. So for writing, it's sort of easier. Speaking, you need a human, ideally. Yeah. And so that is pretty much it. It's not gonna be very easy. You need to put in the work and you need to spend the time doing it. It's not going to magically learn itself. And you will keep forgetting if you don't realize that you learn and you forget, and that's normal. Forgetting is part of learning. Like, I'm not saying it as like, as a motivational thing. It's a fact, a scientific fact. So you need to understand that, and you need to take this into account when you create this routine for practicing, for studying, for learning new stuff. So I hope this really helps you. Now, the example I gave you with flashcards is just one. There's a lot more ways you can do this, as long as you remember that you need active practice, not just reading them. There are other ways you can make flashcards. In the next few months, likely, I'm going to release a course on flashcards, if that's something that interests you, if you want to get even more efficient in the way you study vocab and other things, actually, because you can use flashcards for a lot of stuff. Then make sure to check it out. I'm gonna definitely post something about it here. And reach out if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them. I hope this helps, and if it does, let me know in the comments. I'll see you.